Good morning, and thank you very much for joining us. I am Yori Folarin. Hope you had a great weekend. Okay, about a fortnight ago or so, the Northwest governors, said that governors of the Northwest region of Nigeria adopted, a common approach in tackling insecurity. Part of this came out of the launch of the Zamfara State Community Protection Guard in Gusau, and so we'll talk about that. We'll focus a bit on northwest of Nigeria insecurity. Talking here about banditry, kidnapping, cattle rustling, indeed, outright terrorism. Okay, one of our guests today, Lanre Suraju, he's a security expert, anti-corruption crusader, and chairman of HEDA. He's joining us remotely from outside of the country. I don't know if I'm at liberty to say where you are outside of the country, but great that you could join us. Thank you very much, and good morning to you in our time here. I can say that we have a 6-hour difference between where you are and where we are, so we doubly appreciate the very early call that you are getting. Okay, you heard my introduction. Yep. We want to focus on that. Banditry, kidnapping, cattle rustling, general insecurity, especially in the Northwest, and then the pledging of the governors from that area to work together, adopt a common strategy. And part of that was the inauguration of the Zamfara State Community Protection Guard in Gusau. Tell me, this is the right direction, of course, but how much of a difference do you think this will make? Any little bit will definitely help, but talking about this new formation, do you think it's going to help?
Thank you very much for having me. And I think it is already getting to the point where we need to actually tell the truth to ourselves and stop allowing this amount of deceit in terms of this political pronouncement of setting up this and then coming together on that, when we don't actually deal with the root causes of some of these insecure situations that the country has already been subjected to. I think one of the key points that would clearly tell if there's any form of seriousness on the part of the governor would be to actually understudy and understand where why some of these situations are prevalent, and then also where you don't even have a semblance of it. So my personal experience, and then also for any discerning mind, would be to look at a state like Kano, which is about the most populated in the northwestern region of the country, and it's not actually subjected to this militancy and kidnapping. And I would expect that Kano would have been a case study for quite a number of other governors who would want to see this level of insecurity brought to a stop in their state. But where it is just about whole setting up of guards and then vanguards and bodies and the rest of that, it is actually just begging the question. I mean, the level of insecurity would have to do with actually how much we have compromised, the security system in terms of the police. And the kidnapping that happened in Kaduna. Kaduna, for instance, is nothing short of even more secured, I would want to say, than Abuja, the seat of government in Nigeria. If you look at the amount of military formations that you have in Kaduna. And with the last kidnap, it is not something that you want to also just dismiss. And it is important for us to look at critically, how could that be possible? So you're talking about 287, students being kidnapped. 287 would require something close to about, even if you're using motorcycle, about 144 motorcycle to move them. You would be requiring about a full Boeing 737 aircraft to do that if you want to use it. If you're using shopper, it might be about 32 of them. And if you're using our 12 downfall buses that we all know, that will require about 24 of them. That is not a movement that can actually succeed without either tracing, either contact by our security agencies and network. And where you have this festering, two things are clear. The political elite are compromised, and then also the security system are also indicted. So if the governors are just coming around, if we're not able to check with our banks, you can imagine the audacity of the amount of money that was actually demanded as ransom to release these children. That is more than the budgets of several states put together, almost the national budget at some point in time is what was demanded as ransom by the kidnappers. It is telling us that we might be having a situation even where the chief executive officer of the state might also be kidnapped in times to come, and the state would have to be paying official ransom for that. So for the National Assembly and others asking that people should not pay ransom, I mean, that might have some sense gradually, but that is not the situation, because without paying ransom, what is the alternative? What is the way out? Our security agencies are not even capable of rescuing victims of kidnap. So it is extremely difficult for us to actually understand if the governors and the chief executive officer, unfortunately, the governors have been getting away with so many of these atrocities because people focus a lot on federal government and the failure of the state government. When you look at the amount of allocations that goes to local governments and state governments without any substance, go to our state primary schools, primary health center, and you will see no semblance of governance at those places. The socioeconomic system has collapsed. And if you go there to the states where you have this militancy and kidnapping, two things are always also clear. Is that there's been complete abject poverty and abandonment of, the people by the government, or there's been history of ethnic or religious, conflict, and which are usually just traced to our political elites and not just, natural occurrences or accidents.
Indeed. And further complicating this whole matter, I think a minister was saying as recently as last month that, look, we can begin to look for part of the reason for the unceasing violence and chaos in the Northwest at the hands of what he referred to as conflict entrepreneurs. There are those who are, deeply committed to this not ending because it's a source, it's just an enterprise to them. It's just, talk to me about that, if you will, that area about, look, having said everything that we are saying is reasonable, it's logical, there are secret conflict entrepreneurs in whose interest is not, a normal, as it's a return to a state of normalcy.
These are, so you have them both in public and also in private life. So first, in the private life would be our banks. And that is why you've also seen how much many of the banks in Nigeria are extremely culpable in operating several secret bank accounts. And at the same time, both for public officers. So many of the politicians, high-ranking political officers, and even direct civil servants, directors and civil servants are also having these so-called managers' accounts that are behind the radar of the financial intelligence agencies in Nigeria and also the law enforcement agencies. Unfortunately, the government and the system have consistently failed to bring to account our banks for these atrocities. So every almost indicted political office holder of corruption have the banks that are complicit in many of their activities. The same thing, and that is where the failure of the government clearly to actually deal with the situation is more pronounced. The same way this is done for politicians and civil servants to hide, their loot and at the same time allow for the free reign and operation of secret accounts is the same way that you have this for all those criminals that are also behind terrorism and militancy. And the failure of government to actually understand that by bringing to justice and also book, rather than using some of them as prosecution witness, is also responsible for festering of insecurity in the country. That is number one. Number two, many of our telecom service providers, so you can also remember and understand when MTN, for instance, was indicted for failing to deactivate numbers that were not traced they were not registered by Nigerians or traced to NIN. So you can also confirm that quite a number of some of our telecom service providers are selling SIM cards that are not registered on the network, making it extremely difficult, if not impossible, to trace users and also the numbers that are used by these, kidnappers for collecting ransom and also conducting their activities. So these are the key entrepreneurs, conflictpreneurs that we're talking about. Then you also get to some of the chief executives in the states. It allows for some of them to continue, what they call these so-called security votes that is not subjected to any form of accountability when they claim and pretend to stem insecurity in their states. And it's almost very unfortunate, and it's getting to that point where either the security vote is put to a stop or there's proper scrutiny to what goes to security votes. It is as bad as, local government chairmen also have security votes. I think councillors also have security votes. So everybody gets security vote, and there's no security that is also provided in the system. There are politicians who also harm many of their so-called supporters for the purpose of their political gangsterism. And at that point, when they either dismiss them for whatever reason, or the political leader gets to either die or change camp, those harmed, supporters still go away with their ammunitions without any form of control to operate within the system. And the ones who, for political reasons, also want to create chaos within communities for ethnic reasons, for justification of their political aspiration. It has never been in the interest of the communities, but just for personal interest, for political aggrandizement and also settlement. Also face many of these situations.
Indeed. And that statement, that I sort of paraphrased, I actually have brought it up, and it was actually the Minister of Defense, Minister of State for Defense, Matawale, who said this in an interview with NAN, News Agency of Nigeria. Banditry has its economy, which is fueling crime in this country. Conflict entrepreneurs do not want insecurity to finish in this country. Many people in the north are part of this business. So that's quite worrying. And to quote him further, I call it a business now because those fueling drugs are part of it. Those selling food, fuel, other essentials are all part of it. The informants get a lot from doing this, and they are paid handsomely for that crime. So it's, as you've been saying, and he's actually said, it's widespread. So now, at the bottom of all of the problems, first of all, in many places in the country, but particularly in the Northwest, has been this issue of poverty, and people resenting their poverty and wanting to get up and do something about it. And we have heard people say that, look, if you address the plight, the situation of the citizenry, we might begin to make headway in terms of tackling insecurity. Yeah, we've heard that, and I know you certainly have. You were nodding in agreement there. How doable is this, given the extent of the problem? I mean, if the country could just shut down, take all resources, everything that we have, and face the Northwest and say it is because we want to remove the problem there, that's not a doable situation. So are we therefore condemned to a continuation of this incessant banditry, kidnapping, cattle rustling?
No, I'm nodding in actually not in total. Well, I agree with Mr. Watawali, who was the former governor of Zamfara State.
Yes.
And my real concern is how much of how our politicians are able to sermonize and then also speak to the country as if, statements are made with that to people who suffer maybe some form of amnesia, because we actually have a very clear understanding and also very recent the history of the performance of Mr. Wasawali as the governor of Zamfara State. I mean, that was one of the states under him where the whole form of militancy and banditry became also more pronounced and put Zamfara on the map of one of the most insecure states in the country. I mean, the BBC documentary on the complicity of also the state government while he was a state governor in that state is also more recent and is still there if you Google. I mean, it's always a friend to get some of those information. There's also the record on the amount before he became also the Minister of State of the indictment by the EFCC on the amount of billions of naira that was also looted under the government, including vehicles that were moved out of government house when he was leaving office. I mean, these are the real causes. It is not just those peasants, informants, and all the rest of that. Those could only exist and fester in such a system where this ground is laid by governors who have deliberately and consciously failed the system, refused to provide job for all these jobless young people and others who will, rather than get a decent job. How many jobs was created in Zamfara under the Mr. Watawali as a former governor to have engaged the jobless and unengaged young people in the states? How much of opportunities were created for businesses to thrive? So quite a number of them creates this system and this network, and at the same time the fertile ground for the insecurity to fester. And they deliberately also look the other way, like I said, because it provides them the opportunity to continue. Many of the governors that we talk about, they don't even live in the states. It was at some point that we always have local government chairmen. I mean, that is still also the experience and the situation. Who would become government chairman in the local government, and immediately they are elected, they relocate to local government outside their. I've really not seen that happening anywhere in the world except this country, that they relocate and live in other local government. Now, majority of the governors, particularly in the Northwest, don't stay in their states. They stay in Abuja and they live in Abuja. And it is only just once in a while that they visit the states. So these are very serious critical situations that we must, and like you said, we can't shut down the country, but it is possible for us actually to focus very seriously on many of our governors. Any of the states where you have the level of insecurity becoming not only intractable, I can assure you, and I think the system can always challenge some of us to that. The state governors are also almost nearly all people. It doesn't take that long, for you to engage not only even the local capacity and system, including the available international one, to track some of this situation. But because it allows for and where you're unable to do it, you can point, identify, and also locate people that are behind it if it goes beyond capacity of the failure to do that, like I said, is still an indication of complicity of the leaders of the states.
Indeed. And as it was worsening still, the situation, complexity of the situation, food and hunger go together. Now, the World Bank has been predicting that severe food crisis is likely in 7 northern states of Nigeria. So the World Bank has predicted that Katsina and 6 other states in the northwest and northeast regions will suffer severe food crisis due to high levels of insecurity and armed conflicts in those regions. This is simply by looking at data available, and it's going to happen, and we're all looking at it. That's why we're trying to focus on it. Quite frankly, what are the ways out? What ways are there out of this situation? We didn't even need the World Bank, Yeah, thank you, World Bank, with all your statistics to tell us that, but we didn't even need that to know that the way it's continuing, people are unable to go to the farms, banditry is coupling with this. It's becoming a hellhole, certain areas. I don't know. Give me your thoughts on it. For instance, okay, let me just tell you, let me just give you one paragraph more from the World Bank report. The bank, in its latest food security report, highlighted Zamfara, Kaduna, Sokoto, Borno, Adamawa, and Yobe as the other 6 states that may battle the food crisis because of insecurity that has reduced the standards of living in the regions. This is what we're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, so it's very sad and very unfortunate. I think part of the reasons and the challenges are the fact that our political elites are almost or nearly considering the situation that people who are hungry can always be at the easiest for them to manipulate and then also subject to the level of, the scrambling for food opportunity and also becoming political tools in their hands. And this is not been about just also looking beyond the immediate implications of the insecurity situation that we have. So where you have the banditry, how do you expect people to go to the farm? I mean, how do you want people to actually produce, even the ones that are doing or engaging in the immediate, family subsistent farming? How do they afford to do that? This is the kind of living standard for majority of the people in those states. So even without the World Bank, like you said, without being told, it is obvious that where these people cannot afford to engage in the immediate, it's just almost like what you are having in the Niger Delta, where you have the situation that people are traditional fishermen and farmers, and you experience high level of pollution of the water and then also the farmland. It is inevitable that you have situation where people will be subjected to not only just hardship, but also there's going to be famine and then also there's going to be hunger. And so inevitably, what has saved the situation with the Niger Delta is because there's been the investment of some of these job opportunities, no matter how minimal, and then also the amount of flow of the federal allocation and resources that can still provide some measure of, little trade that people get to engage. It's a complete different ball game when you look at the North. And I think we need to appreciate where you can get one or two examples without holding brief. You can still look at what is happening in Borno State. So despite the level of the invasion of Boko Haram, you can see a kind of a government that is struggling to bring things back to life in such a place. You can see also the situation that is also happening in Adamawa, in Bauchi. I mean, looking at the Northeast as a whole, and you would appreciate what is that. But when you look at a state like Kaduna, for instance, and you're looking at the local government, that is like Shikun local government area, where those children were kidnapped from. I mean, this is actually a local government that has accrued about 45 billion naira from federal allocation alone in the last 8 years, they are about. And you can't point at, any substantive, development in that state. You can't see any semblance of governance in terms of education, health, and the rest of that. So once this are failing within the system, it is inevitable that you are actually breeding criminals within those areas. And the earlier we get to see the political leadership gets to see this, the better. Otherwise, it's going to be such almost like an unending situation of crisis that would not only just lead to the famine that is actually being projected, but also increasing state of insecurity. And I think the situation is not abating. It is actually just exacerbating.
It is. Okay, it's interesting that you in a commentary on the northern part of our countries, and in particular the Northwest, an extension to the Northeast, you ended up commenting on the Kaduna situation in spite of, some substantial monies that have been, aimed at the problem over there. Some people are saying that they're wondering if we have got our money's worth. Well, we'll take a break now. So when we come back,